please, no! 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 No!
Welcome back to another episode of Generation Red, a Husker Podcast, the kettle corn of Husker fan podcast, where we try to be sweet, but tonight we might get a little salty. I'm your host, Ken.
Yep, I'm the other one, Scott.
Yes, indeed. After the, debacle in Dublin, I don't know what the heck to call it. All I know is it was kind of same dance, different season. There's really not much else you can say about it except that it just did not... It looked good in the first half, right? Everything looked good, and then... I mean, God, the food was good, Scott. We had 7-layer dip. We had the wings that your mom made that were outstanding, and everything was great except, halfway through the third quarter on?
Pretty
and
much.
It just kind of took a dump all down our backs. So, yeah, this is a joyous podcast to do. It seems like maybe we shouldn't have started this. Maybe the reason Nebraska keeps losing the first game of the year is because we started a podcast. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the corn cob, what is it? Husker Cubcast.
Big Red Cobcast, or Go Big Corncast. I don't remember what the hell they're called, but yeah.
They said the same thing. They started, right at the end of Riley or something like that, and so they've just...
Yeah, something like that.
Getting this black magic out of our system, I guess. No, it was atrocious. It was, there was a tale of two halves. As I mean, if anybody are avid listeners of our podcast, we had that sentiment quite a few times last year. Tale of two halves, and I mean, honestly, the first half, even though it looked good, you could see the foundation being laid out for what the second half was going to look like. All it was just going to take was some time and some really just getting our asses beat into the ground enough times to where Northwestern was just going to take over, and that's exactly what they did. There were some good things and there were some bad things, and we're going to dive into all of that. But yeah, what if there was one word you could describe this game as being, if you had to summarize it in one word, what would you pick for a word, I suppose?
One word? Boy, that's a good question. What would I use for one word? Overhyped.
That's a good one. That wasn't
Overhyped.
One of the. That wasn't any of the words that were going through my mind, and so I'm glad you said that because that fits perfectly.
How about you? You've got a word in mind? Apparently, you came up with the question. I would figure you did.
No, I kind of just like pooped the question out of my brain just right then and there, just because I thought it would be fun to start it off. I think the word that keeps circling around in my mind is repeat. Just repeat. Same shit, different day. And it's
is what it is, right?
It is what it is. So we've got overhyped and repeat, and I think that's a good description.
We could combine the two. This season was repeatedly overhyped.
Yes, precisely.
You know what, though? It's interesting. I don't know if you caught it, but Big Eyes on Big put out a podcast. I don't know if it came out last night, but it hit my player today, and it was short. It was just them reviewing the games from week 0. They started with Illinois, and then they ended with, of course, our game. And I think they're probably a lot more positive about the Huskers than we are, to be honest, because they were like, hey, Casey Thompson's a revelation. That dude's got a dart for an arm. And he was deadly accurate in the first half. There's just so much, but yet once it seemed like the pressure was on and it seemed like Northwestern's defensive line was getting a little closer to him, it was starting to look like a familiar story. But good news came out of the Eyes on Big podcast was the fact that, one part's not exactly good news in that Big Kurt is not leaving the show, but he's just not going to do the midweek podcast during the season. His life has just gotten crazy. But our buddy Dustin Schutte will be joining Jeffrey the Greek then to do the midweek podcast every week. So that'll be outstanding. Congratulations,
Nice.
Dustin. Really looking forward to listening to the show with you on. Not that I didn't enjoy it with Big Kurt, because I truly did. But anyway, so that's some positive news.
Yeah, and just off of that, just, you know, shameless plug, or not shameless plug. Well, I guess I'm shamelessly plugging them, as my dad is talking about the Eyes on Big podcast. If you are a Husker fan, or honestly a Big Ten fan, I'm assuming anybody listening to this podcast are obviously Husker fans, but if you really want to get kind of an objective and well thought out and detailed review of the Big Ten all the way around, please subscribe to the Eyes on Big podcast. It is really good. Their hosts are amazing. They
funny,
you know. Oh yeah, they're funny. They're
hilarious.
Goofy.
They make each other laugh every episode. They throw something at each other that they're not expecting, and it's always awesome.
And they're very complimentary of each other.
Yep.
If somebody's got a piece of information that the other doesn't have, you know, the other one will return the favor. And so they're very thorough, and it's very enlightening to learn more about the Big Ten through their podcast. So shout out to them.
Absolutely. Love Jeffrey, love Kurt. Their content is outstanding. We're hoping somewhere down the road that Jeffrey will be kind enough to come on the show with us. He said he's willing to do so. It's just about finding that right time to do so. So anyway, let's get into kind of the meat of the review. We'll start off. We've just got 5 bullet points, numbered points we want to talk about tonight, specifically related to the Northwestern game. Sorry, folks, I'm a little flustered today. Brand new camera has been kind of giving me a little bit of a fit, but it sure looks a lot better. Anyway, Black Shirts, we'll start with them. They gave up 527 yards of offense. Do you recall a game last year where the Black Shirts gave up that much offense to anybody? I don't think they gave that much up to Ohio State, for crying out loud. That thought just hit my mind, and I didn't bother to research it, so that's my bad. But good Lord, 526 yards. That's just craziness. What was your first thought or general thoughts on how the Black Shirts performed yesterday?
I honestly think they need to get their Black Shirts revoked. There wasn't a single aspect of our defense that I could look at and say, well, at least that looked good. The corners were off, the linebackers were off, the edge rushers were off, the defensive line was off. Yep. And as I said on Twitter, I think I said this on Twitter, my prediction of our defense taking a step forward in game 1, granted it is just game 1, was completely off. And there was nothing about that defense that I could say was remotely good.
Right.
There were a few individual things that were done, but I mean, even the parts of the defense the moments that the defense had that were good, they were not good. They were sandwiched into something that wasn't good, like the Cam Porter helmet to football fumble. Like, cool, we got a fumble out of that deal, but he was also on a 20-yard rush at that point. You know, like he was doing something good, and it was just the helmet just so happened to hit the right spot, and you could look all across the defense throughout the entire game, and it was pretty much the same thing. If there was something good, it wasn't necessarily uniquely well-rounded good. It was just one individual made a play when nobody else was, and that's just kind of my overall take of the defense, was that it just was bad. It was just all around bad.
In answer to that question I just asked about how many yards Ohio State put up on our defense last year, it was 495. So we gave up more yardage to the team picked last, to finish last in the Big Ten West, than we gave up to Ohio State. I get it. This is a younger defense than it was last year. We lost 6 super seniors. 3 of them are in the NFL, I think, maybe 4. So that's a lot of experience we lost, but still, holy smokes, to give up 427 yards to a Ryan Kalinske-led offense is just crazy. 313 through the air, 214 via the run. You're not going to win a lot of football games if you're giving up 200 yards on the ground.
No.
You're just not. the interior of the defensive line, it seemed like Feast and Robinson were just getting. There was one run, I think it was in the fourth quarter. I was rewatching the game in the 60-minute version of the game on BTN right before I got on here. And there was a run, I don't remember if it was Porter, I think it was Hull. They were backed up inside their 10 or 15-yard line. It was like 3rd and 7 or something. And this hole just opens up wide open. And I watched it, and then on the replay, I'm like, Colton Feast was double teaming one offensive lineman, and the guy ran right around his backside. What the hell is a defensive lineman doing double teaming an offensive lineman in the hole? It made no sense to me. So that was why that hole was so stinking big. Was Feast was acting like an offensive lineman, helping him open his own hole. So at least that's how I saw it. I don't know the X's and O's, and to be truthful with all of you folks watching, we're not X's and O's gurus. We're football fans that look at Husker games from kind of a big picture point of view. But that play was kind of indicative of everything that day. People couldn't get off blocks. Linebackers like Nick Henrik were missing tackles when he doesn't do that very often. So I don't know if it was jet lagged, wasn't quite ready to play. I just don't know. And all three of the edge guys, right? Tanner and Nelson pregame, we saw him losing his mind and psyching his buddies up. And I don't know, maybe they expended way too much energy being hyped before the game, but they were gone. I think O'Shawn might have forced one bad throw the whole game, but I didn't see a whole lot of pressure. And linebackers, like I said earlier, I wrote this note. They were missing tackles like they were being coached by 2017 Bob Diaco or 2007 Kevin Cosgrove, two of the worst defenses Nebraska's ever seen, because in those years, those linebackers couldn't tackle either, which is hard for me to say because Reimer and Henrich have been so stinking solid. So I just don't know what to think. How about you?
Yeah, one of the things that I especially noticed on our defense were the secondary and linebackers not being able to make open field tackles to save their life. They were arm tackling, they were not getting the right angles on guys, and when they were getting their arms wrapped around them, it was like they were trying to wrestle a pig in a grease pit. You know, that it just was like it just seemed like they were just outmatched and outstrength against any one-on-one situation. And unless they were getting like a perfect target, like hitting them directly in the center mass of their body with the momentum going in the perfect direction, they were just doinking off of Northwestern players all damn day. And yeah, I think the biggest disappointment are the edge rushers with all of the hype around Nelson. And I was one of those guys. I was really hyped around Nelson, and Caleb Tanner and O'Shawn Mathis. Between those three guys, they were non-existent completely. And it was just so unfortunate to see. The secondary and the defensive line were the things that I had the biggest question marks around, and for good reason, because our safeties and our cornerbacks were just they seemed confused. They seemed like they weren't communicating. It looked like where they were supposed to be on the field, whether it was zone or man, they were just not where they were supposed to be. And they were half a step behind anything that Northwestern was attempting to do on offense. And so they could just chew us up on every aspect, like between every level of our defense. They were able to just chew us up. And yeah, man, like this is the worst linebacker performance I've seen out of Nebraska in a very, very long time. Some things you could look at and say, it just needs a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of, it's the first game, they got to kind of hash some things out and, work out the kinks a little bit. But just out of that game, from the eyeball test, it was awful, just god awful.
There was, as I was watching the replay, on BTN. I saw the one earlier this afternoon, and there was one guy that stood out on defense that seemed to be there whenever a decent play was made, and that was Tommy Hill. When it came to him making a tackle, he was pretty solid. I saw at least 4 individual tackles he made in open field that were excellent. So there was one positive I saw out of the game. Unfortunately, there were just way too many holes in the middle of the field, especially in the passing game. There were times that Helinski was making throws where you couldn't hardly see anybody in the picture on the TV. When he completed the pass, it was like, how is it that wide open? I mean, the first touchdown he threw was busted coverage. It just was, I don't know, man. I don't know. It just was hard to watch. It's hard to watch the defense play, for sure. And, hey, hats off to the Northwestern punter. You want to talk about a dude dropping some darts inside the 20-yard line? That guy was money all game long. Yeah. Absolutely all game long. I mean, good job. Good job on that punter who his dad played for many years as an Hall of Famer. I think his dad's a Hall of Famer as a punter in the NFL, so comes from good stock. Anyway, I think we're kind of done with the black shirts. I really don't want to get that much more depressed. So let's move on to some positivity in the game, which was the offense that was only 62 yards behind Northwestern in 355 passing yards, and unfortunately 110 yards rushing in the Big Ten is not going to get it done. It's just not. You got to rush for 150 or more to expect to win these kinds of games. And the rushing numbers with Grant himself were not great until he busted that 46-yarder. Yant wasn't doing anything. Allen looked like he had some potential, but as you said, he missed quite a few holes where he literally ran right up the back of his offensive lineman. I'd chalk that up to youth. Makes me wonder where Gabe Irvin was. Maybe he was in that casino with Ramir Johnson. Just a rumor going around, folks. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. But without that TD, Grant would have run for, 64, 65 yards for the day. So it wasn't great. That offensive line was not doing the job that we were hearing about they were doing in fall practice, which probably indicates that's why our defensive line was having a hell of a time stopping Northwestern's run. I mean, that stands to reason, don't you think?
Yep. Yeah, the offensive line was abysmal.
But they protected Casey Thompson quite well. That's what blew my mind. They really did a good job for most of the game keeping him clean.
Yeah, but what I noticed was that they were doing more of like a step back contain where they weren't allowing them to necessarily get immediate pressure, but what they were doing was I don't know if it was on purpose, but immediately allowing the pocket to collapse and then trying to sustain distance between that collapsing pocket and Casey Thompson for the first half. And yeah, that was evident in the fact that when we had to run and the offensive line was supposed to get a push or make holes, they couldn't do it. And so even though they were preventing immediate pressure on our quarterback, I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that Northwestern basically from the beginning and all the way up until the end of the game, they didn't need to bring pressure. They just 4 guys. That's all they needed. 4 guys, whole game. Mm-hmm. They didn't need to necessarily blitz or have an edge rusher that would come out of the side, because all they wanted to do was just create pressure and almost force Nebraska. Yeah, you're going to have to pass, because when it comes down to it, when you guys want to run the ball, we're not going to allow you to do it.
Yep.
It's not going to happen. So they forced us to pass the ball. I mean, when you're only able to average just under 3 yards per rush, excluding that 46-yard run that Grant performed on, I mean, yeah, why the hell not? Just keep your secondary and your linebackers completely covering the field, because if one thing that I noticed was that when Northwestern had a guy open, he was open because there was somebody missing their assignment. When Casey Thompson completed a pass to an quote-unquote open guy,
there was a guy right on his hip.
There was a guy right on his hip. He just put the ball exactly where it needed to go. We didn't have those wide open guys that Northwestern was able to get.
Yep.
And so when I look at the offensive line on our side of the ball, they were doing zero favors for Thompson, other than, yes, they were for the first half sort of kind of preventing pressure on him.
Right.
But when the context is that they were only pressuring him with 4 guys the whole time, like, that's not good. That's not good at all. And it was almost like Pat Fitzgerald.
And when they did bring a blitz, they got him to the ground on the one sack. Was one of the few times they brought a blitz. So, and the few times that we bring pressure with more than the front 4, there was somebody wide open. So we stopped pressuring.
It was almost like Pat.
We never were ahead far enough in the game because, kind of the rule of thumb is you get up by 2 touchdowns, then you start bringing heavy duty pressure on the quarterback, force him to make, because that's when things start rolling the wrong way. We never got that far ahead, so we never really took some gambles in the pressure game that maybe we could have if we would have been able to get ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead. I interrupted something you were going to say.
I was just going to say, to me, it seemed like, and this is just me reading the tea leaves here, it seemed like Pat Fitzgerald knew before the game even started that he wasn't going to need to do much to dominate our offensive line. It was almost like he was whipping out his cock and just like displaying it for Scott Frost. Like, look, I'm only going to throw 4 guys your way, and I'm going to win this 95% of the time.
Well, here comes the explicit tag.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. Wouldn't be the first time.
This is the right game for it. So
yeah, we gotta. Yeah, I hear you. And there was, of course, the 2 interceptions in the second half. One of them was certainly an overthrow by Thompson, and then the other one was. I'm not sure if it was an overthrow or he expected his receiver to do something different. Rewatching the game on BTN in 60 Minutes, you couldn't hear what the commentary was as to why maybe that was an interception. I don't remember it at the time watching it yesterday. But it was definitely an overthrow, and the other one was tipped by the receiver being targeted for a pass for the first time in the game. Wyatt Lever, best as I could tell, I'd never seen him in the game the whole time. And it's in the crunch time in the 4th quarter. He's in there to catch a bullet pass over the middle. Anyway, yet again, more curiosity on how they're rotating players in and out. It just kind of surprised me.
Yeah, when I rewatched it, I didn't watch the full 60 minutes. I just watched the highlights, which, as I texted with you earlier, I'm only going to get to see the highlights. I don't get to see all of the garbage plays, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. But yeah, that first pass to frick guy from Iowa that transferred, I was really high on
Martin.
him, number 89. Yeah. Oliver Martin. Like, the ball was completely catchable. I watched it in slow motion. I was like, I'm going to watch this pass in slow motion and see if he fully extends his arm for the catch. And he never does. He crab arms it. He does this little and I think if he would have get it, and I tried another thing. I watched it in slow motion to see if maybe the defender had his arms wrapped around his biceps or something, and that's why he couldn't extend his arms. But no. He was underneath his arms. And so I just, that first interception, just dumb. Like, that's on Martin. And then the second one, oh my gosh, why are we putting Wyatt Lever into the game? If he wasn't on the starting roster, if he wasn't the first guy out there when we did our first possession starting the game, exactly what you said. Why are we putting him in crunch time? What sense does that make? Was that a Mark Whipple decision? Because I question it if it's a Mark Whipple decision or a freaking Mickey Joseph decision. I don't see that as either one of their decisions. I see it as another one of those executive Frost decisions.
Who knows? I don't think he was ever asked specifically about that choice. I'd like to point out that Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, whom our buddy Justin at the Husker Cuzcast was very high on for good reason. He was received for over 100 yards yesterday. Eight or 7 or 8 catches for over 100 yards. Where the hell was he on that play then? I mean, the dude had Velcro for hands the whole day. But of course, he had that one big catch, and then ended up being the victim of what I consider a so-so call by the refs. I think they got it wrong. Unfortunately, the video evidence wasn't capable of showing fully and completely that they got it wrong, and they're kind of stuck making the call they had to make, but they got it wrong on the field in the first place. Which that likely ended a scoring drive, and maybe that's the difference in the game. Yet again, we're talking about a game that 1 or 2 plays, something that happens with the ref's call or something that happens on special teams, which we'll get to, is basically the difference in the game.
Yeah, so. And I do have to at least look at it through an optimistic standpoint, even though, we did kind of get a bad call on that, which is expected in any game, not just for Nebraska, but for any team. You're bound to get a bad call every game.
Right.
But one thing that was notably good was the fact that we only had, 1 penalty the whole game?
Maybe 2. I think we had an offsides, and I think we had a false start. I don't remember for sure. It was a pretty clean game, though. I don't think the 2 teams combined for more than 6 or 7 penalties.
Let's see. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, we had one penalty for 5 yards.
It was offsides. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And so that was good. Yeah, I was pretty upset about that not being overturned. But I mean, what can you do? I mean, you look at the replay and it's really hard to interpret it. Looking at it really closely, it's pretty obvious that his knee was down, and the ball. I look at it like this. It's obvious that his knee is down. It's not obvious that the ball has come out yet. And so based on that fact alone, you have to assume that his knee is down and he still has possession of the ball. It wasn't the other way around where you can clearly see the ball out and you can't clearly see that his knee is down. It wasn't that. And so the fact that they made that decision, I don't know what footage they get a hold of when they do make those decisions. Obviously not the same that we see on TV. But whatever. Nevertheless, just went in the wrong way, and that was early on in the game. So I don't think that had, it could have ended in a scoring drive, but there were a few scoring drives that we did have that if it wasn't for something dumb that Northwestern did, we wouldn't have scored on those drives either. So it's, it kind of balances out.
Yep, absolutely. Do we want to move on to Frost's comments on the offense when he was asked about it in his press conference? It seems to be pretty appropriate to throw that in here. Yeah.
I'll just preface it that I'm sure anybody's seen it on Twitter or Facebook or whatever social media platform you have, but the kind of disrespectful comments that Scott Frost had made toward his offensive staff, and I'd seen, a binary interpretation of it was that, he was absolutely throwing his staff under the bus, and then I was seeing people make comments like, it's him clearly saying we on offense, so he's taking accountability for it or something like that, and I guess we'll let you guys decide. What do you think of these comments in full context? And I will read them slowly after he makes them in case you miss out on exactly what he says. But here we go.
We got to get this turned around.
How surprised were you about the physical difference there?
I don't know if there was a big difference, but we certainly didn't dominate. And again, I give their staff a lot of credit too. There were some scheme things that they hit us on offense. I think we're going to have to learn as an offensive staff that you got to be a little creative in this league. So we have some things that we can work on. We did a lot of good things, but it's got to be more of a complete game.
Yikes.
Yeah. So might have been hard to hear kind of stumbles over his words a little bit, but essentially the question that was asked was, how surprised were you about the physical difference there, implying between Nebraska and Northwestern? And he essentially says something along the lines of, there's not really much of a big difference, but, we certainly didn't dominate. And again, I give their staff a lot of credit. There were some scheme things they hit us on the offense. And then he starts to go off in a different direction with that and goes, I think we're going to have to learn as an offensive staff, you got to be a little creative in this league. And that's kind of the quote right there that kind of blew up all over the interwebs and made a lot of people upset. And I'm one of them. I don't care which way you read into that is an unnecessary comment. And especially coming from Frost. He is the same guy who said, I think the league is going to need to adjust to us. And what happened? He needed to adjust to the league. Frost, before coming to Nebraska, was hailed as an offensive mastermind, and that has not come to fruition even in the slightest bit. And so when he's trying to make a comment to his own offensive staff about that they need to be a little bit more creative, it blows my mind, because what about Northwestern was creative? They weren't doing anything crazy. They weren't doing anything flash. They weren't doing anything flash. Exactly. Nothing flashy. Just a straight ass whooping. Just an absolute middle finger to us, daring us to stop them. There wasn't anything flashy about it or creative about it. They were just doing simple, hard-nosed football. And the fact that Frost has the audacity to tell his, offensive staff, we just got to get a little bit more creative. Like, creative, which we'll get into it, as creative as an onside kick after we're up 11 points because you think that that's going to put the nail in the coffin to the game. If that's your idea of creativity, God, I would hate to go to your art show, because it would be miserable experiencing something like that. And I can see why the interwebs is upset about it for good reason. I don't see an easy way to make that a statement that is good, in essence. Like, that seems like a conversation you have in your locker rooms or your office with your staff. Like, hey, guys, I think we need to be a little bit more creative, and then have them shut you down because that's a dumb idea. But in a press conference, terrible idea.
Yeah, you mentioned there wasn't a whole lot creative about what Northwestern did. He said they did scheme some stuff up, which sounds to me like, crap, our defense wasn't really prepped to play. But there really isn't a whole lot of stuff that Iowa, Wisconsin, and even Minnesota do that's all that creative. They line up, they run zone plays right up the gut all the freaking time, and they just figure it's like Novocaine. Eventually, it's going to work. And it always does. Every game that we play those three teams, it seems like in the fourth quarter, we're the team that's puffing and puffing. We don't know what to do to stop them. And that's exactly the playbook that Northwestern decided to use. They ran the ball, 19, 20 times in a row at the end of that game from the midway through the third quarter on. They hardly attempted a pass because they knew they had us beat at the line of scrimmage. And speaking of line of scrimmage, and speaking of creativity on offense, I don't buy that BS a bit. Not a bit. Don't have to be uber creative. You don't have to have great schemes, because the former O-lineman who played with Frost, I believe it's Matt Hoskinson. I don't know 100% for sure. He's a host of a podcast called Beyond the Turf, I think is what it was called. And he was on Hail Varsity a couple weeks ago. And he told Schmitty, or maybe it was another podcast, I don't remember for sure. He told Schmitty, or whoever he was talking to, that there was, when Frost was first hired, he went to him and said specifically, if you're going to win in this league, you have to have a damn good offensive line. And he said that Frost told him, I don't need that great of an offensive line because my schemes are superior to anything that's out there.
Yikes.
Little humility might need to be required if he's going out there and saying that his offensive coaches need to be more creative. Seems to tell me that he doesn't think he should have let go of play calling duties in the first place because he thinks his schemes are superior. That's how I read it. That's simply my point of view, how my eyes and my ears perceive things. And let's be honest, Big Ten is a line of scrimmage league, and we literally got manhandled on the line of scrimmage by a team, as we said earlier, picked to finish dead last in the Big Ten West. So either one of two things is absolutely true at this particular moment of this conversation, Scott. Number one, Northwestern is way better than everybody else out there thinks they are. And they could be. Crying out loud. Pat Fitzgerald is a wizard. He figures out how to pull stuff out of his rear end every even year on the calendar. I'm not sure why that is, but he does it. And, or we're just really awful. And I'm truly not sure what the answer is to those two. Which one I should pick. I think Northwestern's probably better than everybody thinks they are, but I don't think they're that good. And I really don't think we're that bad, but I just don't know. We'll find out probably on September 17th if that was just an anomaly or not. So
yeah, I think
how
that's
about,
it's a good comparison.
Let's address the ginormous elephant in the room. The dribbling kick that went down the field and was absolutely telegraphed by our kicker. Even I knew 2 steps into his approach to the football that he was fixing onside it. And the guy that caught it 2 out of the corner of his eye and flipped right back around to make sure he got the ball. He knew it immediately. So it was horrible execution. I'll say that. Number one, horrible execution on the part of the kicker. But what the hell are you calling an onside kick for when your defense has been leaky? I mean, horribly leaky. Why would you do that? He said, just as we listened to, well, I don't think that clip was in there with your audio, but in he did say that was totally his call. Frost said it. And he said he thought it would be if it was successful, he could end the game with 10 minutes to go in the third quarter. How do you end a game with an onside kick with 10 minutes to go in the third quarter? Do you think Pat Fitzgerald's going to run across the field and throw the white flag, say, screw it, I don't want to play anymore? You don't end a game with an onside kick with 10 minutes to go in the third quarter. You just don't. I mean, even if you get it and you score again, the way they were carving our offense up, no, I wouldn't have been comfortable with a 21-point lead at that point in the game. So, especially with somebody like Fitzy, who's spent 17 years in this league and has won 49 games by 1 score. 49. How many has Frost won? 5? 4?
3.
Something like that, or 3? Yeah, let's just count them down. It's just, and somehow he thought, hey, if I get this, we're going to put this game away and it's going to be over. I mean, what in his 4 years of experience here gave him that indication? Makes no sense to me.
Let's look at it through. This is the thing I was thinking of. So, to give Frost credit, please bear with me here. His idea and Husker Nation's idea and any sports pundit about Nebraska's idea of Nebraska is that they need to find a way to assert their dominance, put their foot on the throat, and just win games. And I think that was Frost's way of attempting to do that. Like, he was attempting to be like, yep, we're going to put our foot on the throat and we are going to, put our foot on the gas, insert metaphor here about dominance and all this stuff.
No fear
but I mean,
of failure, blah, 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 blah. Yep.
Like, I just see just such an out-of-touch mentality with specifically that decision. Because, one, you are playing Northwestern that, even though we had beat them 56-7 last year, that was truly an anomaly in our
yeah.
tussle with Northwestern. We got extremely lucky that we were able to get up on them as quickly as we did, and that's the only reason why we won the game. We forced them to play a style of football last year that they are not used to playing. Once we were up 21, 3 scores. Once we were 3 scores up on them, we forced them to use a different game style. And I think that was partially why Frost attempted to do that, because he really wanted to get up 3 scores on the guy.
Yeah, I get that.
But out of all of the ways that you could try and do that, you do it on special teams. Like, how out of touch are you? Like, we've had the most abysmal special teams performance that we've ever had in Nebraska history the last few years. And so you attempt to do it on special teams. And then you've got an offense that seemed to, up to that point, have at least somewhat of a rhythm. Yes, kind of going into the third quarter, Casey Thompson had a few little, hiccups, questionable things, but nothing too egregious. Right. And so instead of putting all your chips in on the fact that maybe we could go 75 yards down the field and get a touchdown and be up 3 scores on these guys, that the onside kick, like, what are you thinking? You are so out of touch, just completely out of touch with what you think is the right method to securing a game. And then, like you said, you have 10 minutes left in the third quarter. Do you honestly think that Northwestern is such a pushover that they're not going to look at 20-plus points left in the game and think, yeah, we're winning in the trenches, we're winning in the secondary, our quarterback is actually doing a really, really good job from his first game?
Yep.
Like, you are so out of touch with not only the history of your head coaching career, but the current circumstances that you are given at the moment. Like, it just screams ignorance, just pure ignorance. And that's why, at this exact moment, I don't want Scott Frost as our head coach. But that's another episode for a different day. And I want to still wait to see how these next 3 games play out. What are we going to do against North Dakota, getting off of an airplane and having only a few days to train up for that? How are we going to do against Georgia Southern at night under the lights? And especially, how are we going to do against OU? I'm going to wait for those 3 games to play out, and I will make my official judgment then. But as of right now, as rational as I can possibly be based on how irrational this game was to observe, I don't like you, Frost. I don't like you.
I got it. I'm with you. I
So out of touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So that makes me wonder if he's actually literally trying to get himself fired by doing that. If it works, great. It's going to be awesome. We'll go down, we'll score. My career will go on, but this is the seminal moment in my career, and I'm calling an onside kick, and if it works, it means the gods of football have decided I get to stay at Nebraska. I don't know. This is just us being goofy and weird and not being your typical media podcast. So we're doing our best to channel our inner Big Red Copcast, I suppose, is what we're doing.
With less F-bombs, of course.
With less F-bombs, way less, and no gummies anywhere in the vicinity.
Shout out, Tweety. Love you, bro.
Yeah.
Accept my follow request on Twitter, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to our 4th point, which is, do we think that Casey Thompson is the 2.0 version of Adrian Martinez? Now, let me just say that in the heat of the 4th quarter, I obviously verbalized that in the house as we were watching the game. At that time, I thought he was, and upon rewatching the game, he was actually pretty good. Even most of the way through the second half, he was really good, really accurate. When his guys had any kind of a step on the guy that was covering him, he was putting the ball where it needed to be. So my apologies to Casey. I don't think he's Adrian Martinez 2.0. I thought he had an outstanding game for his debut for the Huskers, and it should have been over 400 yards.
Yep.
You don't just slightly overthrow Trey Palmer or whoever that was probably going to score there in the third quarter. It's a different outcome. But he did miss a few open receivers in the second half who at least one of them could have scored, maybe 2. The wideouts did let him down at the end. As we said earlier, why was Wyatt Lewer in the game at clutch time? He hadn't been targeted at all, and his tip is why that last INT happens. So your overall thoughts, that's all I really have on Casey Thompson. I think he's going to be great. I really do. I think he's going to be a good leader. a good quarterback. That, good God, that play he made where he improvised and he ran, it looked like he was going to run, then he flips around and he just slings that ball down to IGC, and just unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable field awareness, much better than I thought he would be in a situation like that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does for the rest of the year. Your overall thoughts on number 11?
I'm gonna wait and see. There were some good things that I could pick out of the performance that he did that I can look at and see a bright future for the kid. And there were a few things that made me question a little bit. And yeah, upon rewatching, I think if you would call them mistakes, you know, the 2 interceptions he had, I mean, they were basically on target. What I remember from Martinez was that when he made interceptions, it's because he threw it directly to the defensive guys, the defenders, whatever. And I didn't really see that. If he did throw an overpass, underpass, whatever you want to call them, they were safe. He wasn't throwing them directly into the hands of a safety. He wasn't throwing them, you know, wildly left or right to where, you know, it's going to the cornerback because he just didn't get the dart correctly.
Right.
I guess overall, he shows potential to be a good quarterback, but I'm going to still hold reservations on calling him a good quarterback or thinking that, you know, he's not an Adrian Martinez or whatever, you know, whatever comparison you want to make to him with Martinez. I'm just going to wait and see. I'd say that his performance, if I were to give it like a 0 out of 10, I would say is like a 6. You know, it wasn't like overly great. It wasn't terrible. It was a tale of two halves. I would say he was like an 8 out of a 10 in the first half, and then the second half it was like a 5 out of a 10. But I wouldn't say that it was unclutch. I think what he was doing, where he was moving the ball, I felt like we were potentially moving down the field in the last 2 minutes of the game. It sure seemed like it. And if it wasn't for that tipped Wyatt Lever attempt for receiving the ball, I think we had a potential to go down the field. But then again, I said the same things about Martinez throughout his entire time being here, and it just never came to fruition. So until I see Casey Thompson clutch a victory for us, then, you know, whatever. We'll see.
Yep, I hear you. I can understand that point of view. I just think at this point, I like his potential to lead us to one of those come-from-behind victories more so than I did with Martinez. We saw 4 years of that, and it never happened. The only time Martinez was clutch at the end of a game was 2018 Iowa. He led us down the field. We scored a touchdown, and he throws the 2-point conversion to tie it up. And then after that, never happened again. Never got close again. So at least it looked like that drive had potential to move. And I liked the effort Trey Palmer gave in getting that first down right before the INT, where he caught the ball and got hit by a couple dudes and broke tackles and got out and got a first down.
We were pretty impressive. I forgot about that.
Playing so deep in our own territory on almost every drive after the first drive of the game. It was unbelievable. So I thought he was good. You give me a 355 yards from our quarterback against the Northwestern defense, I'll take that all day, every day, and think that he threw 3 touchdowns. But he didn't. So, do we really want to talk about the missing man formation, if you will? Most notably the wide back that was not playing a down in that game?
Honestly, not particularly. I just hope that we can see Ramir Johnson later on in the season, whether it's next week or geared up for OU. That's what I would hope to see. Same thing with Gabe Irvin.
Me too.
You know, I mean, I would just like to see our running backs do anything. at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to see some holes open, for crying out loud, right?
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, no, we'll just lay that to rest until more information comes out about that. If
Yeah,
any.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that cracked me up when you put that in there, though. I have to admit, that made me chuckle. That made me chuckle. Well, let's turn our attention, since we're done. We flushed the toilet now. All the crap is gone from the Northwestern game, and conceivably, come September 3rd, Nebraska should be able to kind of right the ship a little bit against an FCS opponent. Dear God, please tell me we're going to right the ship against an FCS opponent who went 5-6 last year and only averaged 146 yards on the ground and 240 through the air. They had 27 red zone touchdowns out of 49 attempts. That sounds pretty familiar. 41.5% conversion rate on third down, a 52% conversion rate on fourth down, which, quite frankly, isn't bad, right? That's my
poor
dog.
puppy.
Yeah, it's my poor doggy. They did give up 26 sacks for a total of 148 yards lost. That's just over 2 a game. So there's maybe a potential there for the edge guys to get a little confidence. They did lose to Utah State, which was their one FBS opponent, by a score of 48-24. The game was, God, please help this not be the case for us. The game was 4 hours and 14 minutes long. So both teams obviously threw the ball a lot that day. It was a grand total of 65 yards rushing by North Dakota and 374 passing. They only gave up 1 sack, though, for 8 yards in the game, but the defense did give up 217 on the ground and 404 through the air. So I look for Casey and hopefully Anthony Grant to kind of get himself going in this game the next week. Should be a depth builder, and or it could be a 14-10 crap show loss. I honestly don't know what to expect. Looking at those numbers, where do you assess Nebraska fitting into what they need to do in this game? Boy, that was a weird way to put that. I'm sorry.
No. I got it. I was picking up what you were setting down. Well, I think we're gonna find a way to win this one, which is really sad to say it in such a weird light. We're gonna find a way to win against North Dakota. I mean that. I mean that. I honestly think that based on what I saw against Northwestern, let's just assume here that Northwestern, you know how you kind of brought forth the one or two things that are true. It's either Northwestern is really, really good and Nebraska has a lot of things to work on, or Nebraska is really, really bad and so is Northwestern, and that's going to be a really bad posture to carry over for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
I'm going to be pessimistic, and I'm going to say that we were both actually really bad, and that we barely squeaked by an equally bad team, and that we just got off the plane. Our guys are going to be jet lagged. We're going to do the same thing over again, where we have a few days to prep for this, and I don't know what the morality of our team is at the moment, but I don't foresee them being ignorantly optimistic about this game. And I think that North Dakota is going to think the same thing. And I think that their coach is going to get their guys coached up really, really well for this game. And I think that they're going to go into Lincoln thinking they're going to win.
Sure.
And so I think it's going to be a close game, and I think it's going to turn up the temperature on Scott Frost's hot seat. And I think that Nebraska barely, and I'm going to say barely in context of us playing North Dakota, barely wins a game against North Dakota, and it's going to be something like a 38-30 victory, Nebraska.
38-30. Okay, so you're looking at a lot of points then.
Yes,
on either
I
side.
think that. I think that Nebraska is going to have to do something on offense, because somehow, some way, North Dakota is going to find a way to exploit our lack of black shirt defense. yeah,
Okay.
That's just what I see. I see it being kind of like a what team was it? 2019 we played South Alabama, was it?
Yeah. And
And
except
going
for a
into
couple of a defensive touchdown, 2 of them, and a return by J.D. Spielman for a touchdown on special teams, we didn't do crap.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a team that you could look at and be like, this should be an easy win. Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a few good things. They're kind of like a Troy.
Right.
They've got talent on their team that could be used. North Dakota doesn't necessarily have that, but I mean, you look at the context of this. Any coach worth their salt is going to look at the way that we performed and the coach in question, the team in question, the defense in question. There's a lot of question marks on Nebraska right now. And if I'm a coach for even the shittiest team you could imagine, I'm looking at that as an opportunity to get a really, really crazy victory. Yeah. So I go Big Red, but goodness gracious, I feel like this one's going to be painful to watch.
Yeah. So you're kind of in that John Johnston from Coordination mode, right? Where he says at the end of some of his videos, like last year after Minnesota, F everything, there is no hope, and go Big Red.
Yep.
Oh,
I like it.
You know what? I know this is not going to even come close to matching my prediction that I made for this game when we talked with Dustin Schutte. Because I think I had us at 24-14 or 24-21 or something crazy like that they would give us a game. I'm going to go the positive route and change that prediction. It certainly doesn't match what I thought weeks ago. But I think we've seen what this Whipple offense can do as far as starting fast. And I think they start fast again. They score on their first drive, and they don't quit. They just have no problem putting points up. And by the midway through the third quarter, you've got Purdy and Smothers in the game, and Nebraska pulls away at the end and wins comfortably 42-17. And the only reason it's 42-17 is because they probably put up 17 points in the second half on our second and third team defense. So that's kind of how I see it going. I see Nebraska kind of get right. Maybe gain a little confidence going into Georgia Southern the next week. So, by God, that was easy. That was easy. Plus, minus. The results were not good for all 3 of us. We all picked the plus on 2 TD passes by the Huskers offense. We only had 1. That first drive was the only touchdown pass of the game. Otherwise, you had a run on a read option by Casey Thompson for the second touchdown, then 2 runs by Anthony Grant. So, well, all 3 of us got 0 points on the plus minus. So, for this game, with North Dakota giving up an average of 2 sacks a game, I set the plus minus at 2 sacks for the Black Shirts this week. What do you think, plus or minus on that?
Well, I want to say 0.
So you're definitely going minus.
Yeah. Until I see the Black Shirts actually earn their Black Shirts, I want to say 0.
Okay.
That's just kind of where I'm at. But I see that you already have a pick. I can't remember how our plus minus goes.
We can pick the same. We can pick the same one. So you can pick minus, I can pick minus, and we don't have to give a number. Just say minus or plus and call it a day.
Yeah, I'm going minus. I'm going minus on that.
Yep, that's where I'm at, minus. Probably 1 at best. I don't think it'll be 0. I think somebody will bust through and get one. Might not even be one of the edge guys. It might be somebody like a linebacker or something early in the game. I don't know.
Sounds about right.
Anyway, that pretty much wraps up. Hey, my camera went away again. Imagine that. I should know to look up about every 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Sure.
You gotta figure that out.
It shuts off the screen about every 30 minutes, and I thought I got the setting fixed, folks, but apparently I didn't. But then again, looking at a black screen is probably way better than looking at this. Team Jack. as we wrap things up, we are going to be involved in the Team Jack 10th annual radiothon. Have no idea what that means yet, but Team Jack does some great work for pediatric brain cancer. Make sure you go to teamjackfoundation.org for more information on how you can help out, because brain cancer is one of those things that affects, it's one of the leading killers of children, and it also, the treatment for it also causes them long-lasting effects that hurt them throughout the rest of their lives. So please do what you can to help out. Go to teamjackfoundation.org for more information. To follow us, you can find all of our social media info on genredpod.com. That's genredpod.com. It's our website. You can find our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube links there to follow those 3 social media outlets. You can also message us at genredpod@gmail.com for any comments, suggestions, or questions for the show. And there's one more I'm missing, Scott, and I can't remember what it is. No, it isn't. Oh, Generation Red on your favorite podcast app to be able to download the audio version of the show. Hey, it's how the show started. I should remember that. Anyway, we thank you guys so much for watching. You're the best. We've been really seeing some traction on our YouTube channel, seeing some traction with our downloads. Scott, they're moving up slowly but surely. Here's hoping some W's will help those move up even more. And until next time, he's Scott, I'm Ken. Together we're Generation Red. And we're here to remind you every single week of what you already know. But just in case you happen to forget, one time, Iowa's corn sucks. And there is no place like Nebraska.
Go Big Red.
Absolutely. Beat the fighting, what the hell are they? The Fighting Hawks. That's it. The Fighting Hawks of North Dakota. Please. For God's sakes,
Please.
beat them. That would be
For the
awesome.
love of all that is good.